this illness often have. It was very successful. In terms of the number of views, 2.2 million times mentioned on Twitter. There were 1.2 million videos posted on Facebook. So most of those videos were actually people taking the challenge. So pouring a bucket of water over their head, and it was mentioned 50 million times on Facebook. So it was not just successful in terms of the number of views and the number of shares, but also it led to a very big increase in the number of donations from 1.7 million to 11.4 million from 2013 to 2014. So this shows that a viral campaign like this can be very successful. However, that's not the case for most companies trying it. Actually, it turns out that it's quite complicated. I've been in brainstorming sessions at Procter & Gamble when I worked there, where we tried to come up with an idea for a viral campaign, and it is just really difficult to come up with anything. And I think over time also consumers started be less willing to share content. Okay, so this trend, this is a graph that is created with Google Trends. Google Trends measures how often people type something into Google. And you can see the one trend, the blue one, is for viral marketing. You can see that it's a downward slope. Roughly around 2009, it went down, and at the same time, you see content marketing going up. So in a way, content marketing has overtaken viral marketing. You can argue that Google Trends is a measure for popularity, essentially, because it's what people type in Google, that's what's on their mind, and therefore popularity. And so I'm now going to talk about content marketing. You can see that there has been this move from viral marketing to content marketing. Okay, so what is content marketing? Here's the definition from the Content Marketing Institute. A strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience and ultimately to drive profitable customer action. I've highlighted, I think, the main part of it, which is creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content. So it's about, you probably are, if you're on social media, you're probably following a company or an artist or an author, for example, who is constantly posting stuff there, and you're following them. That is essentially content marketing, also often called content management or just content creation. Yes, as I mentioned, this is nowadays a much more common way to approach social media compared with viral marketing in the past. Two more definitions that I think add a bit more to your understanding. First, these are from academic resources. The first one says it requires companies to have a publishing approach, but the content does not need to generate profit by itself. It needs to lead to attracting and retaining customers. What is meant by a publishing approach is that you essentially become a publisher, like a newspaper that is constantly every day released, or every few days releasing new content, and you need to plan for that. You need to build an organization to do that. Then the next definition is it is non-obtrusive. Brands use non-promotional stories that are carefully integrated in social media platforms. So non-promotional stories means you're not trying to sell your product. You're not trying to advertise, at least not all the time. You're trying to build a relationship with your followers, and over time it will lead to attracting customers and generating profit, but you're not trying to constantly bombard them with promotional messages. And the analogy I often use is that of a first date versus a long-term relationship. When you're on the first date with somebody, you are talking a lot about yourself. You're trying to sell yourself essentially. But when you're married to somebody, you think, I've been married for about 15 years. I don't need to sell myself anymore because my wife knows what are my pros and cons. So in that case, you want to communicate to your partner or your relationship with, understanding what their interests are and talking about their interests. And that's essentially what you do with content marketing. You're trying to understand what your target customer wants to hear about, and that's what you focus on in your communication. And of course, you do it in such a way that that it makes you look good, but you're not constantly trying to sell your product. Okay, just quickly comparing viral versus content marketing. So for viral marketing, the success metric is the number of views. The more views, the more successful. So you're essentially trying to maximize your audience. Most companies don't do many viral campaigns. They might run one per year or two per year. What it's really about is one campaign, this one big bang. And success is really driven by the idea. So you need to have a good idea. It's called a big idea in advertising. And if your idea is good, then typically the execution is not difficult. And then it's just a matter of posting it on YouTube, sharing it with a few other people, as I said, your employees, for example, and then ultimately will be successful. That might sound easier than it is, but if you have a good idea, then that will lead to a certain measure of success. In comparison, content marketing is not about the number of views, but it's rather about how much engagement you get. That means, for example, how often people watch your content, whether they comment on it, and whether they take any kind of action afterwards. So it's much more a long-term approach. It's not about having one view, but it's about them, being subscribed to your content for a long period of time. The audience is much more targeted. It's not about reaching as many people as possible. It is about reaching your biggest fans and your most likely customers. And that means that you're often talking to a much smaller group of people. And those are the people who are willing to consume your content for a long period of time. The frequency is continuous. It goes on and on. There's no end to it. How often you post it depends on what kind of company you have, what kind of content you're producing. Some companies post something once a day. Others are more comfortable doing it a few times a month. And I know individuals like authors who do it at least 4 or 5 times a day. So the key success factor here is the creator, in my point of view. It's you need to find somebody who's not just creative once, but somebody who is able to produce a huge amount of content for a period of time. I've had a small YouTube channel for a while, and it's extremely challenging to post something there. I try to post something every week, and that's easy enough for the first couple of months, but at some point you run out of ideas. And you need somebody who's then able to come up with new ideas and develop new content. So I'm going to show you a little case study of a company and of a YouTube channel that's one of my favorites. I bought a guitar about 10 months ago, and I've been following this YouTube channel called Employability. But before I start with that, just a quick question, and you can, if you want, unmute and shout your answer. Who is your favorite guitarist? You want to respond to that?
For me, it's Jimi Hendrix, because it's the only one I know.
Okay, Jimi Hendrix, and the only one you know is actually quite a common response, I would say. Okay, what I did here is I posted basically I would say the most famous guitarist for the decade, right? Jimi Hendrix is 60s, David Gilmour 70s, Eddie Van Halen 80s, and Slash 90s. Most people would name somebody like that, or maybe Eric Clapton or whatever, but the main point I'm trying to make here is all these guys are at least 50 to 60 years old. Slash is 54, I looked it up today. The era of guitars is finished. Nowadays, people don't listen to music with guitars anymore, and the whole industry for musical instruments, I'm focusing mainly on guitars because that's my interest, but the whole industry has shrunk significantly over the last 20 years, except for maybe drum machines and sampling machines. So that has a big impact on the industry. You see brands like Gibson and Fender, the leading guitar brands, are not doing very well. Music stores that had hundreds of places in the US not, are shrinking in a few locations. But there's one company in the UK called Andertons that's actually doing pretty well. This is their store, and it doesn't look that phenomenal. It's a bit bigger than what you would expect from an average guitar store, but they do have this as well. They have a big warehouse where they have a huge number of products, and the reason is that they sell most of their products online. Their online store is one of the two biggest in Europe, along with Thomann, which is in Germany. And they have basically grown their online sales over the last 10 years. In 2018, they were named by an industry organization worldwide the Dealer of the Year, and also they got an award for the best online engagement. And many well-known guitar brands and manufacturers and artists recognize them as the place where you can sell guitars and promote your brand. So I don't know anything about their revenue, but this is how they basically described it. So they said that since they started the channel, it was about the YouTube channel around 2010, they've seen their online engagement grow, and in the same period, they've also seen their revenue grow. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a causation, right? So it doesn't mean that online engagement led to revenue, but there's not much else that has changed. The industry has not grown. So I think it's fair to say that I think that the YouTube channel had a pretty big impact. Most of their videos have been watched 100,000 times up to a few million times. So yeah, their engagement has definitely had a positive impact. So what do? They make a YouTube channel where they talk about guitar technology, new products, etc. I want to discuss their approach with a framework that this framework for the content marketing process. It's not really there are many frameworks you can find on content marketing. This is one I took from a textbook, but there are many that look something like this. So it's not a standardized, well-known framework, but it works for me.
And sorry, just a quick note. I tried sending a chat. Could you please maybe get closer to the microphone, because when you speak, you tend to move your head a little bit, and we're having some trouble hearing you. So I think the microphone is okay. I don't think that's because I received some chats indicating that we can't hear you too well. I think it's not a question of the microphone. I think that it's just when you move a little bit, the way you speak, it's basically sometimes the voice, sways. So if you could get closer to the camera, the microphone would be great. And
is this better like this?
Yes, if you could start talking, so then we can assess it.
Is this okay?
Yes, I think it's okay. Just closer to the microphone, and because it's like we can't hear you too.
Yeah. Is this okay? It's now a lot closer?
I think it's much better now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll try to speak louder as well. Hopefully that helps. So the content marketing process has 4 steps, this process, and it starts with the target audience. So defining your audience, then the brand essence. Now, you can also replace this with brand identity or brand equity. I think the main point why they use essence here is because it's more condensed, more focused than what you would communicate through a brand equity. Then content planning, so actually planning the content, and then finally execution, which is producing the content. I'll go through these steps and explain what Anderton is doing as far as I know of it. So when it comes to the target audience, you typically start off by trying to segment your audience. So in case of Andertons, they might talk about experience and age. There's not exactly the same thing. For example, I'm relatively old, but my experience in guitar is actually quite low because I haven't played for about 20 years. So you need to keep it in mind. Budget is important because for people with a bigger budget are willing to pay for different things. And finally, musical interests. People who like jazz play different instruments than people who play metal. So what you do is you segment your audience. You try to come up with a couple of different profiles or personas. And then for each of those, you try to identify what kind of content are they interested in. And that will be a starting point for developing your strategy. The next step is to define your brand essence. Now, I don't know what a brand essence is for Edmonton's. I'm thinking about contacting them for a case study, for a written case study, but I haven't done it yet. But this is what I get roughly from their website. So they care a lot about their shopping experience. So first of all, they have a big product range, which, you know, if you're trying to buy a guitar, it's good to have all the guitars in one room so you can compare. You know, with smaller stores, that's often an issue. Then an informal atmosphere, so that you can walk around, you have the freedom to browse, you have the freedom to try instruments without, you know, feeling any kind of pressure. And knowledgeable staff. They have staff that is typically, they are established guitar players who know what they're talking about. Then expertise, that's also about the staff, and also they get endorsements from well-known musicians and well-known manufacturers that are basically on the YouTube channel saying, you know, this is, you know, they come to the YouTube channel to talk about their new signature guitars, for example, and that gives them a lot of expertise, a lot of credibility. Fun, so the management style is very laid back. You can see that from the videos. The videos are all very humorous. Staff behave very relaxed, and I think that also is part of it. And then finally, not really visible on the channel, but they also have very good quality services like sales condition after sales service. So then with regard to planning, there are a couple of things that you need to focus on. So first of all, create a list of interest areas. That comes in the next slide. Select the social media platforms. Their main platform is YouTube, but they also have a podcast. And they post everything on Facebook, Twitter, etc. So for distribution, they use a variety of different social media. They have a posting frequency of about once a day, maybe 5 times a week. And they have a couple of creators. Most of them are in-house, so they are part of the organization, but also a couple of people coming for specialized content. So what they do, this is the execution part, is they do mainly product reviews. So whenever there's a new product, a new guitar, a new amplifier, a new pedal, then they will post stuff about that. They will post a video about that. Buying guides where they say, if you are a starting guitar player, which amplifier should you buy? And they compare a couple of different models. They have a series that is called Sound Like. And there the idea is that for a certain budget, which might be £500, they will go into the store and try to find the right gear to sound like a certain kind of band or artist, such as Black Sabbath. They have interviews with well-known guitarists like John Petrucci. You might not know him, but he's pretty well-known to metal heads. I'm actually one of my favorite guitarists as well. And then they do blindfold comparisons, which is very interesting. So one of them puts a blindfold on and they play an expensive guitar and a cheap guitar, and they try to compare and try to see if the blindfolded person can pick the guitar that is cheaper or more expensive. And they also do other things, but I think those are the main things they're doing. Okay, so that is the end of the case study, just to show you what content marketing is and how it can be successful. And now I want to go to the research that I'm conducting with 2 colleagues, which is about the organizational part of content marketing. So the questions I'm going to focus on is, how can a company develop capabilities to do content marketing? Who should create the content? About 10, 15 years ago, it was quite common for a general manager to have a blog and to write something maybe once a month on a blog. But of course, general managers are not typically great writers, so ultimately it never led to much. But the question is, who is actually going to do it? What is required of a content manager? And finally, what should be outsourced? And what we did is we analyzed 200 job advertisements for a job like content marketing or social media marketing manager. And we looked at what responsibilities do these people have and what kind of requirements do they have. And what you see here is an overview of the responsibilities. they fall into 5 categories: analysis, strategy, planning, execution, and what I call follow-up. So, and those are the main categories, and we try to determine how often do certain things appear in those ads. So, for example, under analysis, trends, in 33% of these job ads, the content manager was required to analyze trends on, for example, content marketing. And that way you can also look at strategy and say 33% was expected to define the standards such as, for example, what kind of font is being used, what kind of language, what kind of uniforms are people wearing, what kind of images, what kind of mood does the video or the text need to have, that kind of stuff. And moving on, planning, idea generation. Ideation is a very big part of it. Coming up with ideas, of course, is the backbone of developing content. Then execution, 85% of the people were actually expected to create content themselves. Not 100%. Some people were mainly focused on editing, on receiving content from others, and then using that to post it, to distribute it. And then finally, follow-up is about stuff like measurement, managing the community, reporting to management, and yeah, things like that. So that is a rough overview of the study we did. And I want to move on to our main findings, I would say. It's still unpublished, this paper. We are finishing up. We would like to get some feedback from content marketing agencies before we do it, just to make sure we're on the right track. But we're pretty confident about the part I'm presenting now. Okay, so we identified 4 organizational approaches: full outsourcing, outsourcing, technical outsourcing, and in-house. So no outsourcing, basically. And we felt that it depended on 2 dimensions. The first one is, how often do you produce content? So what is your frequency? If you produce content every day or a few times per day, it's more likely that you do it in-house. While if you outsource, it must be something you can hand over and not be too worried about it. And the other dimension is, where does your expertise come from? Do you rely on internal expertise, or do you rely on external expertise? I think this will become more clear with the next slides, where I go to each of those different approaches. So for the first one, full outsourcing, the example I have is of Pampers, which is a brand owned by Procter & Gamble. So Pampers relies very heavily on external expertise. They use phrases like, this is the #1 choice of hospitals, recommended by doctors. So they don't claim to be a health expert themselves, but they say, we are in touch with other experts and they recommend our product. The content they produce, actually, it is quite high frequency. It's like once a day they post something on Facebook, but it's very formulaic. It's every time the same thing. It's a 1 paragraph of text and a little photo. Sometimes with a link to a video, but those videos are made by an agency. And I don't exactly know who posted on Facebook. I suspect it's also the agency. But things have changed a lot in PNG over time, so I'm not quite sure. The type of company, so as I mentioned, the type of company is the company that wants to get its credibility from external experts, and companies that are integrated with a creative agency. Pampers works with, I think it is Saatchi & Saatchi, which is an advertising agency, and this agency does everything creative for Procter & Gamble. So it is logical that they will also outsource all their content marketing. So what we outsource, pretty much everything. And what is the role of the company itself? It is pretty much accepted that no matter what you outsource, you should also always keep control over the strategy and the standards. That is pretty much accepted for any kind of communication outsourcing. And of course, approve everything that the agency does. So that's the first one, that's full outsourcing. Then technical outsourcing. Here, as an example, I'm going to use one of the first company I worked for, which is called Berends. It's a consulting engineering firm. Because they are business to business, they design systems for airports and for hospitals, for example. They don't want to post something every day or even every week. They post things about once a month. And back when I was there, they used to make this magazine called Berends Data, you see here, that came out about three times per year, I think. And so it's a low content frequency. They gather expertise from people inside the company. They want to be seen as a thought leader, so their expertise is inside the company. So the kind of company we're talking about is consulting, engineering companies, technology companies, as I said, that have experts within the company. So in that case, what they want to outsource is all the technical parts. They want to outsource somebody from an agency comes to interview an expert and writes a post about that and then publishes it. And maybe they measure also the final results. So all the technical parts are outsourced. While what the company does itself, besides the strategy and the standards, is that they plan, they come up with ideas because they know they're experts, they know what interesting projects are, and then they let the technical agency know, and the agency will then interview and publish. And of course, the company also needs to approve the final execution. Okay, then we have creative outsourcing. In this case, you do the technical part yourself, but you outsource the creative, which means that you might work with freelance writers, for example, or with users, customers who are actually sharing their experience. So I'm using an example of Star City Games, but it can be any kind of gaming company. Because with games, people are typically more interested in in playing the game, so the user, than they are in how it was made. So the expert within the company. So we're talking about high content frequency, and the expertise is either external, like a number of external experts, or it is based within the user because it's more interesting for the audience to know what the user is doing. So what do you outsource? In that case, you outsource ID generation, meaning that you have freelance writers that yes. Okay, so you have freelance writers who who come up with ideas themselves, who create the content themselves, and then ultimately, what the company needs to do itself, they need to collect it, they need to manage these freelance writers, and they need to edit and publish the content essentially. Okay, then the last one is when there's no outsourcing, so everything is done in-house. I'm using Web University as an example. I could also have chosen editors. So high content frequency, we publish quite a lot, including stuff like webinars and just posts on social media, etc. Our expertise is within the company. We have professors, we have people who know about their subjects. So the type of company are those that we want to be seen as a thought leader in education in certain areas, and that expertise comes from our internal experts, our professors. And we of course have the capabilities already in-house. So what we outsource, nothing really, and we do everything ourselves. Okay, so those are the 4 approaches. So if you want to hire a content manager, what do you actually look for? I think a couple of things are general. Every content manager needs to be able to do that. They need to be able to develop strategy and standards. It is possible, it's actually quite common that a content manager is a bit lower in rank and there's a marketing manager that does the strategy stuff. But I think the content manager needs to be closely involved in that because they know more about developing content than the marketing manager. They need to be able to communicate and they need to be able to collaborate within the company or outside the company, because typically content managers, content creators are They are communicating with many people within the organization. They need to be able to manage a project. There's a lot of planning and workflow planning going on they need to be able to do. And at the least, they need to be able to edit content and approve it. So they need to have a good understanding, even if they're not the most prolific writers. If that is not part of your responsibility because you're freelance writers, then you don't need to produce content every day. So writing is not that important, but you need to be able to edit it and to improve it. Creative, so that is, if you're not outsourcing your creative, you need to probably find somebody with industry experience, because even if this writer or this content manager is not producing all the content themselves, they need to be able to communicate with the experts in the company or outside the company. So they need to be able to communicate. They need to understand the industry and the technology. They need to be able to generate ideas, so it's a lot of creativity. Technical, if not outsourced, includes interviewing, because I think you need to be able to communicate with these experts and do an interview and then write the article or record the video, and then finally managing content, stuff like publishing, posting, and measurement is also part of it. A few optional ones are whether you want to do search marketing, so search engine optimization, or advertising on Google, for example, whether you want to do analytics as part of their job, and whether you want to do web development, so having a website. That really depends on the company. So this is my last slide. So how do you as a company develop these capabilities? Step number one is that you need to evaluate the situation, which means that I'm using a framework called the 4 C's here, which is company, competition, customers, and context. And so first of all, the company, you need to know where your expertise comes from, you need to understand the company. Competition, mainly for benchmarking, what is competition doing, what is accepted in the industry, so that you can copy that and maybe develop it further. Customers, knowing what the customers are requiring, what they want to hear about, and finally context, which is about regulations, such as privacy laws, etc. Okay, then next step is select outsourcing approach. So one of those 4 or a hybrid. You can also have internal writers and freelancers. There's no need to choose one. It can be a mix of multiple. And then appoint a content manager and a content creator. It depends a lot on what the role is, what kind of approach you choose, and also on the role of the marketing manager, how much they can take over. Developing strategy is the next step. Objective, target audience, brand essence, content purpose, that's the subject areas, and standards. And then the last step is to actually plan and produce the content. So when you talk about which platforms are going to be on, what is the frequency that you post on something, who is going to create it, what are specific subjects, and then also the measurement and feedback I can mention. So that's it. So that is my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. And let me know if there are any questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
I have a little question, if I may.
Yes.
I don't know if you can hear me very well.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, so you had a slide about date and long-term relationship, and just before that, you had a slide about story and promotion, but I forget the exact name of the slide. And in this slide, you were talking about companies that do non-promotional advertisement on social platform, but you still said they were carefully chosen. And so my thinking was, using the word carefully, does it mean that there is always a promotional intent like behind it, like for example viral, like if there's something happening in the world, they will all do something viral, like a short story outside of the biggest story? I don't know if it's very clear.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. So you're not trying to constantly sell to your audience, so that means that you're not constantly talking about how great the products are and where you can buy them, that kind of stuff. You can say that, if somebody follows you on Facebook, they already know who you are. But at the same time, you don't want to waste it by talking about something irrelevant. If they if somebody follows you as a guitar store, then we can assume that they like guitars. They don't want to hear you talk about wine, because that's a different subject. They are there to listen to talk about guitars, but you don't need to constantly tell them which guitars you have for sale. You can just talk about who the best guitarists are, and so you want to. The most important thing is you create something. You create content that is relevant for your customer, for your audience. That is not really direct selling, but it does make you look good and does make you seem like an expert in the subject matter, in this case, guitars.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Edward. So we can now officially open the floor for more questions from the audience, please. During the time that the others perhaps gather their thoughts and what they heard, perhaps I could allow myself a question. Do you see any changes now in relation to this COVID situation and how that is going to affect marketing? Whether very often I hear executives saying, for example, that now is not the time for selling. So now is the time to establish the relationship with the customers, with the clients. That marketing is seen now as an effort that is a little bit too pushy. And so I wonder, if I would like to hear the opinion of an expert, whether we will have to reconsider some more refined ways of basically marketing as we used to know it, but adopt it to this new reality that inevitably we will be living in.
Yeah, I don't think there is a straightforward answer to your question. I mean, I can give you a few examples. Of course, it really depends on the industry, I think, first and foremost. One example is my wife actually works for Procter & Gamble, and she's a lawyer, and her company is now very seriously looking into, can they claim that their products are antiviral? Because, detergent, right? Dishwashing liquid, is it antiviral? Can they claim that? And that's a very complex issue, but as I say, my wife's a lawyer, and she is basically working overtime in making sure that it's directed in the right direction, so that they don't make any kind of claim about curing COVID-19 or anything like that. And so for some companies, the whole COVID situation has brought up all kinds of opportunities. I mean, as I say, the marketing people at P&G they're working overtime to get these ads on TV as quickly as possible because they think they want to sell something. I don't know how consumers will respond to these things. And that's why it's such a delicate matter, and that's why my wife is at the moment obsessed about it. Yeah, so that's one side of it. And frankly, I mean, personally, I mean, yeah, I'm not really waiting for. There are many things I cannot buy. Well, now things have changed, but I couldn't buy them, or I have no use for them. So in that case, there's no point selling them to me. Then again, if you think about online education, for example, I think that's the kind of thing that people are seriously looking into. Certainly, people losing their jobs or just being at home without any work. So I think it's really industry specific. I'm really curious to find out how consumer attitudes are going to change over time. You can also think about education. There's this great professor, I can't remember his name, a marketing professor from New York University, who said that the problem is that many of the parents of students have now seen how bad education is, and they might be less willing to pay the huge fees that they have in the US. Well, frankly, I think I'm not entirely sure that's correct, but I think that the kind of education that we served during the lockdown is not representative of how we normally teach. But there are some interesting questions there on whether consumers will still be willing to pay huge fees for the kind of education you can also get online. You know, so yeah, I have no coherent answer from, you know, that is consistent, but I think that it will be something that's interesting to look at.
Certainly, I think that it's going to affect many aspects, and for sure, marketing is going to be one of those areas, and this is going to have an impact and change on. So let's see how that develops. Okay, thank you very much. More questions, please.
I have a little question.
Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Dr. Boon, for the presentation. I just have a question related to the content planning slide. Obviously, I think we're all in agreement that the relevance of the different articles are extremely important in trying to maintain your audience. What about the relevance of specific wording and keywords within the articles? Could you maybe discuss a little bit more and elaborate a little bit more about that to try to attract maybe a newer audience or people outside of your sort of loyal target audience?
Sure. So the reason why you want to have certain keywords in your content, in your text, is because of search engine optimization, right? So if you have certain keywords in your text, then it improves how easily your page can be found by Google search. Is that what you're referring to, just to be clear?
Not only Google. I mean, I'm familiar with the importance of Google, but just the specific wording in the articles that you place on various different social media channels.
Yeah.
Obviously, Google is the largest company that you know that we're referring to. Yeah. But in general, not only Google, are there other importances for using and relevance for using these specific words to try to attract other audience members, not only in relation to Google, but other means?
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I simplified a bit Google because in Google is typically about 90% of where traffic comes from. But yeah, of course, there's a much wider range of social media. So basically, the more you use keywords and the better you choose the keywords, the higher the ranking you have in Google, the more potential viewers you attract. Now, when it comes to content marketing, what I'm really talking about is communicating to people who are already on your social media channel. So, you know, and building a long-term relationship, while search engine optimization focus more on acquisition, getting more people, which is of course also very important. I don't quite know the word link it, but what I can tell you is that you know, in general, it is important to use certain keywords on your website, in your blog posts, etc., because that makes it more likely to be found. But it should not go at the expense of writing something that's easy to read. When search engine optimization became a big deal, which is about 10, 15 years ago, there were many companies that just put as many keywords in their text as possible. But as a result, it read like something generic, something that could have been produced by a robot maybe. And I think that is much more important that when people get to your content, that it's engaging and that they're willing to come back. Yeah, the right keywords should be used, and those should be keywords that the audience is using, because that is what they type into Google or YouTube when they try to find a certain type of video. So using the right words, that means the words that the audience uses is important, but it should not go at the expense of the actual content. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I have a question. Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you for your presentation. My question is about limitation of e-marketing. So, how can an organization deal effectively with these limitations? I'm talking here about security, regulation, dependability on technology, and so on.
Yeah, that's also a very broad subject, of course. I think there are definitely a lot of issues with security, privacy, all kinds of ethical issues that companies should be aware of. There's maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was a book that was written, it was called Permission Marketing. And Seth Godin is the author. And so that's a long time ago. He wrote about how companies, rather than trying to interrupt the audience with banners and all kinds of things, when you're doing something else on social media or on a website and you're getting interrupted, then people are not typically ready to receive your message. So it's actually, it's very cheap for a company to do it, but it's very unproductive in a way. The percentages are very low. While if you actually get their permission somehow to give you content, then you get a much better response. Now, how do you get a permission? Well, I mean, there are certain kinds of companies that can easily get permission. Think about certain bands. I mean, because they are popular, because people care about that. While others might have a much harder time getting permission to share content. So that already means there's a limitation to that. But yeah, I mean, signing up, for example, or becoming a follower on a Facebook page, that basically is a form of permission, and then you can start communicating to them. And so that is one thing you can do. You can communicate to people who have taken some kind of action that shows that they're willing to see your content. Beyond that, of course, there's a lot of questions about, data collection, for example. Are you on Facebook? I don't know what is, of course, the whole, this company, Cambridge Analytica, that was basically, collecting data. On Facebook, if you have a company, you can get a lot of data about the people who follow you, people who are fans of you. And I think that's somewhat fair, but, I think there's a limitation to that as well. And I think that's a whole gray area that still needs to be defined. Even though we are 20 years into social media, I think we still have a lot of questions about that. Again, I think that it comes down to some level of permission. So, for example, if somebody signs up to, you can, for example, as a company say, you've got content that is free, and we've got premium content as well. Or we also can share some stuff with you that is more valuable, like a report or something like that, or some documentation. In that case, you sign up to, by sharing your email address with us, and then automatically signing up to a newsletter. If they do that, then they give you permission. And that's, I think, would be the ethical way to do it. Of course, for most companies, that also means that they get very few people to sign up, so they don't collect any data. So yeah, that's why so many companies are much more aggressive in this, and they break a few rules.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question.
Yeah, I think my question was in the similar. How do you recommend companies avoid, content fatigue or advertising fatigue when you look at the kind of growing expansion of online marketing and the constantly changing wants and desires and needs of the customers? What prevents, or how do they counteract the content fatigue syndrome?
there's I can't remember the name of the author. There's an author, an entrepreneurship author who he used to be a marketing manager at Apple, and he posts on social media on average about 5 times per day, sometimes 10 times per day. I actually like his writing, so I followed him for a brief moment, but after 2 days I've had enough. I had enough, I just shut it down because it was just too much. And what he writes in one of his books is basically, I don't care. He said, I don't care if people unfollow me. He says, it is the small group of people that will keep following me. Those are my customers. Those are the ones that, the 80-20 principle. Those are the ones that buy 80% of my products. That he gives lectures and seminars and sells books. So he basically says, if people are fatigued by my content, it's simply not for them. And I don't care as long as, the people who really care about what I'm selling, as long as they are interested. So that's a bit of an extreme point of view, but it's, I think it's sort of fair, I think it's important to have some kind of focus. So for example, Emerton's is a store. They focus a lot of their videos on products. They don't really do guitar lessons or anything like that. They could, because their guitars their stuff is actually pretty good, and they occasionally go a bit in that area, but they don't do it because it's not their focus. It's not what they're known for, and it's not why people come to their channel. So I think, it's in a way, you're not trying to please everybody, and you're trying to, there's something called a lighthouse identity, which is like, you do what you're good at, you create a beacon, and you let people come to you. If they're interested, they'll come. If they're not interested, they will not come. And so in that way, you define your identity, and hopefully that identity attracts enough people to make it. Does that make sense? All right.
Thank you.
Okay, then I think this brings us to the end of our session. Thank you very much, Edward, for this interesting presentation, knowledge with us. Thank you to all the participants of our weekly series. We still have a session next session the following week. These are the weekly summer digital marketing webinar series, the aim of which is to showcase our expertise, our professors who are engaged at Webster, who are both academics and practitioners with expertise in their fields of knowledge. It's to give you an idea of what you can expect and what we can offer as well to enhance certain skills, basically the skills that are now necessary in the job market, in adapting to the new reality, to the new conditions, and so on, to increase and increase employability as well. I wish everyone, all the participants, and most of all our speaker today, I wish you a very good evening. And thank you very much for your interest. Thank you very much for your contributions, and see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.